I don't know how I follow that last discussion. I mean, no world records. But yeah, very inspiring. I'm also not going to talk about sex. She's touched on the sex part of it and somehow never got to that topic. And the second thing, I'm actually surprised to see anybody sit in here because I thought I'd made a mistake by putting the word HR in my title. But I think looking at this, so first of all, I come from an HR background. But I'm one of the most critical people about HR in our organizations. I left corporate around about 2001. I've been in HR for a long time. And I've been consulting since. I just want to bring up this slide because just now you're going to say, okay, so this guy's from HR. What the heck's he going to know about Agile? So the only reason I really bring this up is to show that whilst I've had a long consulting career and I've really spent a lot of time talking about HR, around about a year ago, I suddenly started questioning what value my particular consulting was bringing into organizations. So my particular areas of consulting was around HR strategy, but not so much that, particularly around organization design. So as soon as I walked into a business, people got scared because they thought, okay, this particular guy's coming in to restructure the business and we're going to lose our jobs. So it was very much around how do we structure a business, who reports to who, spans of control, very much command and control, and looking at levels of complexity and who of you work in organizations that have levels of work and levels of complexity, grading. So we're not so much, I wasn't that much involved in the grading. But when I started really doing a lot of research around agile and digital and artificial intelligence, it started questioning my own frameworks from the perspective of saying, but how do we structure going forward? And are these hierarchical structures going to work? What is the value of doing role profiles and job descriptions and whatever? And I most probably in my years, you won't believe, most probably written about 6,000 role profiles. So if I never have to write another role profile in my life, I'll really, really be happy. If you need a copy of somebody's role profile, I've most probably got it. Okay. But I really started questioning that because also when we look at it from an artificial intelligence perspective, so I know this is an agile conference, but we've got to be touching on things like digital and artificial intelligence and robotic process automation. Where do we start building those particular robots into our structures? Okay, so how do we equate for that, and how do we really start looking at that and saying, this is really part of the new world that we exist within? I was doing work with a client in Germany earlier this year, and one of their clients is the Volkswagen factory, which has 60,000 employees. From what I understand, it's the biggest factory in the world. Now, the guys on the production line, their boss is called the Kommissar. What do you think the Kommissar looks like? It's a computer. The computer tells them what to do every single day. That's their boss. They report to the Kommissar. So when I started looking at Agile and really started to upskill myself, as you can see, I have a few Agile qualifications now. And that's been my journey this year. That's been my reinvention. And one of the things that I will talk about just now is about the reinvention, because I think when Justin was talking, we very much asked that question, so what about the future? What about all those jobs that are being destroyed as we go into robotic process automation, bots, artificial intelligence? What about those jobs? And I'm going to look at a couple of figures there. The good news is actually there's been more jobs created than being destroyed, but what do we do about that? So I wanted to also just start off with a video. It's called Agile in the Stone Age. Hopefully, being Agile practitioners, we'll actually, well, we first have to get the sound up. Let me go back. Sorry, guys, is the sound here? I know you guys are not hearing it. I'm asking the technical guys. Sorry, I think it's good. I think you guys will, it's not, it's a very short video, and I think you guys will really relate to this. So this was most probably one of the very first scrums. Still not playing. Okay, apologies for that. Let me not stick to that, but if you guys do get a chance, go have a look at that video. Hey? Oh, you're saying in terms of what the guys are saying? Okay, let's go back to the beginning then. All right. Sure. Okay, I'm really sorry that the sound didn't work, but I did find that, and I thought about it in terms of, you know, your teams starting to sort of self-choose themselves, etc. And I thought that particular video really came to mind there. So when I have a look at, the guy that chatted about it was make us do a Mindler. So I'm going to refer to a couple of SAFE slides, so please forgive me for that. I'm not going to talk about SAFE. And one of the things we have a look at is in terms of the business results that you get from the scaled Agile, is if you have a look at it there, our engagement is going up incredibly. Productivity is going up incredibly. Time to market, quality. So we're getting all of these fantastic results. But what's driving that at the end of the day? It's the people in our business. It's not the process in our business, it's our people. It's our people learning quicker. Because our people get more engaged, they become more productive. Because we become more productive, we're a quicker time to market. Because we're more productive and we're learning in cycles, we're also bringing down our defects. So it's all around people at the end of the day. And one of the things that I think when I went through my SPC training is one of the things I was really missing to a large extent, and I don't believe was enough time was spent on it. It's all great having all of these frameworks and models and theories, etc., but at the end of the day, it's got to work through the people in the business, and I don't think enough time is spent bringing those people on board that need to make those changes, and in particular in HR. And as I say, I keep on thinking, I don't know if I'm repeating myself, but I mean, we're heading into India and we're in Industry 4.0. We're in that fourth industrial revolution already. And I'm not even sure HR has reached Industry 1.0 yet. Okay. So what HR, to a large extent, sees himself as doing, and please, if there are any HR colleagues in the room, I apologize ahead of time, but I think a lot of you will recognize this as well, is if HR is only there to do recruitment and only there to pay us, then let's outsource that. What is the real difference HR is making? If we have a look at the teams that we're building at the end of the day, we're starting to say they need to be self-regulating. They need to have the T skills. They start getting motivated more by intrinsic motivation than extrinsic motivation. They need different career paths. And we need to continuous learning. Werner spoke about the learning. I've got a slide later on, but I'll just refer to. So the jobs report, jobs outlook that the World Economic Forum then put together, 2018, it says that each employee will need 101 days per annum of learning. I mean, we're lucky if our companies let us get 10. But we're saying that most employees need 101 days. That's not 101 days in classroom. That's 101 days of learning new things because the world is changing at such a rapid rate. And if I just take that a bit forward, so a lot of you will recognize that framework. Great framework there, lots of stuff there, but let's have a look at where the people impact comes in. And I've only just really touched on where the real people impact comes in. It's impacted right throughout that business. So if you have a look at that, then we start looking at, but there's people over there, and it's obviously not showing to the left-hand side, but all of those things in red are being delivered by people. And it's not just about the software teams. It's not just about the technology teams. There needs to be a whole support structure put in place by the support organizations such as HR and finance, etc., that help us do this. So I've seen now, and this is where I really started questioning a lot of what I was doing from a consulting perspective, is we're putting in place agile frameworks, but we're still trying to structure people like we did before, or structure organizations like we did before. So I know a really big bank that's implemented what they call the Spotify model, and I keep on trying to tell them that Spotify is not a model, it's actually an organization, and it has implemented its own model, but understand that Spotify is a small, high-tech business that has a lot of real young, technology-oriented people. So what happens, what works for them is not necessarily going to work for an organization of 30,000 people. But I think the bigger challenge to me, and why I really wanted to talk about the HR side of it at this conference, was that whilst we bring in, and specifically driven by IT and the technology teams, etc., while we're bringing in all of these great frameworks into the business, HR is still using the same policies, procedures, same methodologies, same practices that they've always used. So we're still using individual performance management. We're still using the same reward structures. We're still doing the same recruitment. We're still looking at, one of the things that I tried to advise companies on a lot is to do proper, what I call capability planning, not workforce planning. Because the minute I talk about workforce planning and say, no, we know who's scheduled to work next week. I said, that's not workforce planning. Workforce planning is, do you know the skills you need in 3 years' time? And what are you doing about making sure you have those skills? And that's why I talk more about capability planning. So what capabilities do we need into the future? And how do we prepare for those? And it gets lost. I can't even get them to do proper workforce planning, never mind the capability planning. So you hear people talking about a VUCA world, which is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And you've still got a lot of companies that are sitting out there doing their 3 to 5 year strategies or even longer. And please, I'm not saying we don't need to do strategies, but what we need to be doing is we need to make sure that our strategies are adaptive enough to be able to meet the market as it's hitting us. But the market's not waiting for us. Technology is hit. I think Justin again had that one slide up of, you just saw all of this new technology. So one of the things that, if you'd seen what I'd put up as some of my experience, I've worked a lot with doing future trend analysis. And if you're not looking at what's coming at you, how do you prepare for that? So you might very well be preparing yourself for the software that you're developing now, and who says that somebody isn't already working at it? If somebody releases that same technology that you thought was going to be a game changer, if they release that today and you're still 6 months away from releasing it, how are you going to adapt that strategy to meet it? And one of the sort of examples that hits my mind a lot is then in 2008, I was asked just to do an hour presentation on future trends for a big mining company. And one of the things that I said to them, so you're building a whole lot of new mines in South Africa. Have you secured your cement supply? So that sounds like a bit of a, why would I be asking them about a cement supply? And they asked me the same question, and I said, well, do you understand that we have a 2010 World Cup coming up? We're building massive stadiums all around the country. Plus, in 2006, we had the tsunami in Asia Pacific, which flattened various countries. So there will be a shortage of cement going forward. And it's about looking at that. When we look at the VUCA world and the volatility and the uncertainty and the complexity and the ambiguity, we can't change that we live in a VUCA world. This is our world, and we need to make sure that we adapt to that. And that's why I think that the Agile movement is gaining so much and just continuously, like a rolling ball, just getting more and more and more momentum, is because organizations realize that if they don't make that change, they're going to get left behind. I always talk about there's three types of people. There are those that make things happen, those that watch things happen, and those that wonder what happened. And there's going to be a lot of people on that last group of people who are going to say, like, I think again, I keep on referring to Justin's speech, is he showed the Kodak scenario, who are now out of business. And I'm sure there's so many more examples of businesses like that. If we look at the Boston Consulting Group study here, you'll see, and if I can just have a quick look on my screen so I can just read a couple of these out to you. Nearly half of all jobs in the US could be automated by 2050. 74% of managers say that the company complexity is hurting business performance. By 2020, 30% of tech jobs will go unfilled because of talent shortages. We've seen that one of our sponsors is OfferZen. Got a good business model. Because at the end of the day, this is where our biggest skill shortages are going to come in, is on people like data scientists, people like Scrum Masters, people like Agile coaches. There's just not enough people actually that are going to meet the future demand. But I'm going to touch on that a little bit later with another slide. By 2020, freelancers will constitute 50% of the workforce, and organizations driven by purpose and value outperform their competitors in revenue, profit, and stock performance. Now again, Justin had a slide up, which I actually had it, oddly enough, in my presentation and took it out earlier this morning before he put it up, where he showed those organizations, the teal organizations and organizations driven by purpose, and it's called Sociocracy 3.0. And I sort of sit back because my brother and sister-in-law live in the States, and they actually voted for Trump. No. And I sometimes think when we look at, they've just passed a whole new, I think, don't know how many $1 trillion tax relief program in the States. And I'm wondering if that's the other side of these organizations with a purpose. Because when I look at what's happening in that world, we're going to have one of two scenarios. One, we are going to start with these organizations with a purpose, and there will be those organizations. But are we not also just going to get more super organizations? So, I mean, data has become one of the big, currencies that people deal with. So if I own all the data and I have all the data, do I not just become more powerful than the rest of you? And I start actually just crushing my opposition. So it'll be interesting to see where we go. And there's lots of stuff happening either side. I was reading last week about a company in Australia that they have told all the employees that they only have to work 4 days a week now. They'll still get paid for 5. Only have to work 4 days a week, and they can choose which day they're going to take off. Okay, and their productivity has actually gone up. So there are some organizations that are really starting to think differently. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in that. And I'm going to talk just now about a socioeconomic challenge I think we have. So here's the 2022 skills outlook. What jobs are growing and what jobs are declining. And again, if we have a look at those and we say, what skills, not the jobs. I'm going to show you the jobs now. But in terms of the skills, analytic thinking and innovation, active learning and learning strategies, creativity, originality, and initiative. Over things like the third one on the declining, management of financial and material resources. Can you imagine what heart palpitations that would bring out in most of our organizations? When we say you're actually going to start, we're not really going to need those skills so much in the future. Again, we spoke about the financial advisors. There's software out there already, artificial intelligence, if you want to call it that, in the legal profession. So a lot of the times if you've got cases coming up, most of the money spent on cases is studying all the different case laws and studying all the strategies and whatever. Now with this software, all you do is put in your case details, and within literally minutes it comes back with all the case law that's relevant to that and strategies on how to do that. Okay. And I've done a lot of work in the financial sector, and you have these gods called actuaries. One of the actuaries said to me once that, we don't need to self-actualize because we're actuaries, we're already there. Surely that's just scenarios and algorithms and, mathematics. So are we going to need those into the future? But there's more this, and a lot of the soft skill stuff's coming through as well. And a lot of the broader skills stuff. So in designing a lot of organizations, quite often I've landed up spending a particular amount of time in IT departments. And in IT, everybody's a specialist. Even if they're a database administrator, on their role profile, they want to be that they're a specialist. But we're starting to talk more about the T skills. So if we look at these self-regulating teams that, if there's there's something here that's stopping us doing this, you're not a test anymore, you now come help develop, and then if the testing's a problem, we move to testing. So are we going to move to more generalist skills? And I think that's really where a lot of it's going to happen. So I spoke about the socio-economic problems that I think we're going to be facing, particularly in South Africa. If you have a look at that bottom right there, I actually just got this off News 24 this morning. So latest unemployment rates, we've got 9.6 million people unemployed in South Africa. 27.2%, 6.1 million, that's 38.8% of youth are unemployed. And 45.9% black female youth are unemployed. If we have a look what's happening in artificial intelligence and robotic process automation and the way the world is going, unless we do something radically from an organizational and a societal perspective, I see a perfect storm brewing here. If you think land distribution without compensation is an issue, wait until this 38.8% of youth start getting pissed off, excuse my expression, about not having jobs, especially when it starts getting exacerbated. And I really think that government and business and labor have to get together to be able to address these issues. So when I look at companies again and having advised them on various HR strategies, I say, you know that you're going to need these future skills. You know that you're going to need these future jobs. You know that you don't currently have them. You also know that these jobs on the left are jobs that you're not going to need into the future. So what are you doing about training and developing these people whose jobs are going to be taken over by bots and by automation? What are you doing about training them up to do the jobs of the future? And very, very few companies are actually doing that. There are companies doing it, and that's great, but there's far too many that are not. So you're going to land up with a twofold scenario. You're going to land up, one, that your unemployment rate is going to radically increase, and number two, your talent shortage rate is going to radically increase. They estimate that by 2020, just in America, there'll be 300,000 data scientists short. Okay. Now, if you have a look at that jobs landscape, emerging roles, global change by 2022, there's actually they're estimating 133 million new jobs there. And the declining ones is only 75 million. 75 million is still a heck of a lot. So there's actually a job gain. So we shouldn't be having this issue about worrying about unemployment rising. if we're addressing that gap. And I don't believe as a society and as organizations we're addressing this gap. And it's going to create a socioeconomic issue for us. So the new paradigm of organizations into living organisms. So when we talk about the self-directing work teams and teams of teams, we're definitely starting to see a lot more of a move away from the traditional organizational structures. But that's one of the challenges, again, I think the HR fraternity are faced with, is they don't know how to move into that world. They've struggled even in the current world. You'll hear HR often talk about we want to be a valued business partner. I remember once sitting at a conference and say, we demand our seat at the strategic table. So I said, when you talk about being a business partner, you need to understand what your business does and how your business adds value. And by that time, I got a bit cheesed off with that group of people. And I said, I would like one of you, it was a HR fraternity, I said, please can one of you come and draw the value chain of your business on this flip chart? One guy from Sassel could. I said, if you don't understand your business, you're not going to be able to add any value. And so I see now, even though there's a lot of criticism coming from me about the HR fraternity, in the Agile world and in the digitization world, I see they have an opportunity to really become valued business partners. Because it is about the people now. It's always been about the people, but it is about the people. But it's not about the people and the old policies, procedures, and practices we have. It's about the new ones. The top 10 HR trends, if you have a look at those quickly, redesign of the workplace. And so redesign of the workplace doesn't mean you just move a couple of blocks around. It's just moving around the chairs on the Titanic. Okay. Employee experiences to beat the engagement crisis. So you need to make sure that there's a lot of employee experience. Employee becomes really important. Employees are brands. Personalized learning and growth opportunities. Small HR teams deliver value through iterative agile approaches. So it's not always going to be a 2-week iteration and whatever for HR teams, but there are certain times that they can do that, particularly from a recruitment perspective. Because what is the biggest pain most managers feel? It's about not having enough staff. It's about the recruitment. Empowerment of employees, gamification to improve talent acquisition, smart analytics, transparency becomes the new controlling. That's quite an interesting part. In today's world that we live in, and transparency is most probably, we really push for transparency. And we really want transparency in our organizations. But along at the same time has come fake news. So you don't really know what to believe anymore in this world that we sit in. And one thing our friend Trump has really, really done well is the whole thing of misdirection. So that whole new tax bill that went through this, well, it hasn't gone through, it still has to go through the Senate, that was approved by the small group of people this week, came because everybody was worried about Brett Kavanaugh. Didn't actually see what was happening this side of the wall. And so we really are pushing for transparency, an expansion of talent mining and flexible workforce planning. So one of the interesting things that, so you go through the SAFE training and it talks about co-located and stable teams, but then you've got a whole other side of the world that's talking about flexible teams and bringing people as you want and as you require. And again, I think the really important thing, and I think Werner also said this, was that you've really got to adapt something that works for you. You've got to, so I think Brett Leffingwell said from Scaled Agile, he said, this is not a methodology, it's actually a framework. So use it the way that it works for you. Dean Leffingwell, sorry, not Brett Leffingwell. And there's even an Agile HR Manifesto. So collaborative networks over hierarchical structures, transparency over secrecy, adaptability over prescriptiveness, inspiration and engagement over management and retention, intrinsic motivation over extrinsic rewards, and ambition over obligation. There's a book called Agile HR by that lady there, Pierre-Marie Turan. if you do want to read it. One of the things that so I'm not going to play that video. Yeah, just simply because the videos won't play. But we're actually working on an Agile HR course that will be certified through IC Agile. So it's to help businesses and HR teams to actually really implement proper Agile HR practices. So if we have a look at the evolution of the employee, this is by Jacob Morgan, and it's working anytime, work anywhere, use any device, focused on outputs, create your own ladder, customize work, shares information, can become a leader, relies on collaboration technologies, focuses on adaptive learning and democratized learning and teaching. And then you'll see that thing from the jobs report, 101 days of learning per annum. That's what we should be looking at from employees. So when I go back to that socioeconomic issue, I keep on talking to people about reinventing themselves or making sure they remain relevant. And that's one of the things basically I did, is when I realized that the stuff that I was doing was no longer relevant, I reinvented. And I'm a baby boomer. I've seen a video of a company in Canada running training courses for coders. And these rooms, it's probably a room this full of people, or if the whole room was full, people doing coding training. And you're seeing guys that are sitting there that are 63, 64, 65, learning new skills. Because if you just sit back and hope that society is going to look after you, hopefully it will, but we know it's probably better that it won't. You're really going to struggle going into the future. So what are those things that we really need to look at? And I'm not going to spend too much, because I didn't want to make this too much of an HR discussion, but more of a how do we need to get HR to change to support us as Agile practitioners to make sure that we can do what we want to do. Embrace the new talent contract. So the new talent contract is very much about enabling me to do and grow and learn with you, not having the command and control in place, being part of a bigger purpose, being part of a team, and then foster continuous engagement. So it's about those team discussions and enabling people to have the safety to be able to talk within meetings, to be able to express themselves, to fail fast, etc., etc. Hire for attitude and cultural fit. So we can. My very last job with corporate was with Sun International in Zambia, and if you've ever been to the Sun International hotels on the Vic Falls, I was part of that project to have that set up, and we took 1,000 Zambians who had never even heard of 5-star before. And we trained them to be some of the best people in Sun International, just because they had the right attitude. Literally, we had 1,000 jobs. We had 10,000 people waiting at the gate that we had to interview. Each interview lasted 5 minutes, and we just wanted to see what the attitude was like. Okay, you can't really test somebody's attitude in 5 minutes, but we were able to teach them the skills. And then move to iterative performance flow. So one of the things I'd like to see happening is, no, I don't need to do an annual performance review with you. If you're doing sprints and you're doing iterations, I see your performance every 2 weeks as a team. And your team will sort you out if you as an individual are not performing properly. So why do I need to do individual performance management? So the answer to that might be, okay, because that's how you increase my salary, and that's how you pay me performance bonuses, and that's how you pay me any other bonuses. But that's the next part of it, is take the issue of money off the table. So knowledge workers, most knowledge workers, money is not their greatest motivator. Creation is. So as long as you're paying them a fair salary that is market related, they're not going to worry too much about whether it's the top range or not. And then you start looking at, if our teams are doing well, should we not rather do performance bonus for teams and not for individuals? So take that issue of individual reward off the table, because individual reward drives individual I need to look after myself as an individual. And then support impactful learning and growth. I was on the faculty of the University of Stellenbosch Executive Development Division a while back. And remember we had the crash of 2008, the financial crash of 2008. And in 2010 we were sitting and talking about various things, and I don't know if I was brave enough or silly enough to say, I think as an academic institution and as part of the academic fraternity, we need to take as much responsibility for that crash as the banks, because we had taught them the wrong stuff. Surely if you sell loans at a lower price than you're paying for them, even your 5-year-old kid should understand that you're not going to stay sustainable. So what I'm most probably seeing going into the future, and less 3 to 4 year degrees and more quick courses, quick learning, compact learning. Hopefully the guys that have MBAs here are not like, oh my God, what did I do that MBA for now? If you'd seen my qualifications at the beginning there, you'll have noticed I put my Master of Science right at the bottom. Okay? Because that to me is not important anymore. What's important is my Agile qualifications, because those are what are relevant today. All right, we developed, I developed an Agile maturity model. I don't expect you to read all of that, because I'm going to move on. But it takes you from basically from traditional to awakening to discovery to transformation to Agile. But if I take it up there, I just say, okay, so here we take it now from traditional to Agile, where we're really starting to look at empowered self-regulating teams, work defined by backlogs instead of by role profiles, and et cetera, et cetera. By the way, I'm not very popular when I speak to many HR consulting companies, of which I subcontracted to in the past, because we're really challenging the way they do things. And my very first Agile training was being a Scrum Master, and it was paid for by another consulting company, and they spent most of the time trying to adapt the SAFe methodology to their frameworks rather than trying to adapt their frameworks to the Agile methodologies. And we've spoken about the performance management. I think one of the you've got to start bringing the contingent workforce into play, and how do we start managing those? And if you are going this journey, and you are a unionized environment, involve the union up front. One of the things that I've seen happen before, and I used to do the wage negotiations for Sun International in the late 90s. So I've been down this road with unions before, but I've seen another company who introduced a fantastic performance management system. It really would have benefited the members of the union, and the union rejected it outright because they said, you didn't involve us in the design of this. You came to us with a fait accompli, and you didn't involve us in the design. And going back to that socioeconomic issue that we have, if we don't do it together as labor, union, and government, we're going to have the challenges. I think one of the guys asked a question about, how does it impact Agile in Africa and all of that. If we don't involve the government, we're going to have challenges. Who's old enough to remember when Raymond Ackerman tried to introduce petrol stations where you could pump your own petrol? Okay. What happened to that? Government banned it because of the amount of jobs that would be lost. So if we don't do this together, we're going to face some backlash, and I think that's really where we're going to. So as I said, I didn't want to make this too HRE. I think that the biggest challenges we face in Agile organizations is getting the support organizations to be able to support what we do in it. I don't believe HR is on that journey yet. I don't think finance in terms of dynamic budgeting is on that journey yet. But we need to get that to change, because if we don't, you'll continuously be hitting barriers. And they're not barriers that have been created by the teams that are actually in the Agile world. It's barriers created by people who are meant to be supporting them achieving their particular goals. So thanks very much. I really appreciate your attendance. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Myles. That was quite enlightening. Thank you. We may have time for questions. Nobody wants to question individual bonuses versus team rewarding. How's that going to work? Go for it.
Thanks. I think this is more of a question for you, and the sense is, may I be so forward and to proffer a VUCA answer for a VUCA world? Sure. So if you use that acronym VUCA, the V is to have a clear vision where you're off to. The U is to have the unequivocal ambition and willingness to make something happen. The C is to be clear what your roles and responsibilities are. And the A, of course, will be agile. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, definitely. I think you speak about the clear roles and responsibilities, and that's, I think one of the things that I found surprising at one stage is one of the big banks spoke to, so first of all, they're doing their best to go agile, but I think they have about 15 or 16 different agile consulting companies advising different parts of the business on how to do this. But one of the comments I heard once is, yeah, we don't really want to do this because there's too much structure. Okay. Not realizing that, in fact, in the agile world, we actually have a heck of a lot of structure because we want you to run in cadence. We want to understand your velocity. We want to make sure that you are showing us what you've done over every 2 weeks. People do have sort of pretty clear roles, but those clear roles are not, you are just a developer, or you are just a tester, or you are just a, it's as a team, what are we doing? And when I first looked at it, I said, is there any organizational structure? And if I have a look at the SAFe framework, to some extent there's an organizational structure, because you got the release train engineer, then you got solution train engineer, and so forth. So if you want a structure, there's a sort of structure there. But I think that's less important of the way that we really, at the end of the day, make sure that people are delivering what we wanted them to do. And there should still be the KPIs, but are the KPIs not the working software, if I can call it that, if we just take it to a technology? I mean, that's what we're expecting you to do over the next 2 weeks, 3 months, 1 year, etc. So, we're actually setting that a lot quicker for you and a lot more regularly for you. And you're actually setting it yourself as well, which I think once you've helped set those down, so at your program, your PR planning, you generally sit there and everybody says, okay, we all buy into this plan, and there's the whole fist of 5 scenario. You guys are bought into that. So you're quite happy to now go along with those particular KPIs because you helped set them. But yeah, I think that, at the end of the day, I like your terminology as well. That's great. Thanks for that.
Cool. We have one more question here.
If you're an organization that's currently just transitioning, so very used to hierarchy, and you mentioned about breaking down the command and control, but practically, how would you actually apply the changes in reporting lines? Because someone has to eventually report to someone in an agile environment. So how do you practically apply that if you are a traditional business moving towards agile?
Yeah, it's a good question, and so I'm first going to tell you how not to do it. Okay. So this big bank that I saw that's using the Spotify methodology, as they call it, when I looked at their structures, so they had their tribes and their squads and their chapters and their guilds and they even had their role profiles. And I looked at it and I said, so how's this different to what you used to have? I said, all you've done is actually call it something different. But when I look at the role profiles and I look at the structures, and I see you still have a team manager, you don't have the self-regulating teams. Yes, I know we have Scrum Masters and product owners, etc., etc. But when I have a look at what you've actually put on paper, I don't actually see a difference other than what you've called it. I think what you've also got to, at the end of the day, this whole, and I don't have an easy answer for you because it's got to really be, like most of these transitions and transformations, it's got to be driven from the top down. It's got to be driven by There's the whole word of, and in South Africa it maybe has a bad context, of servant leadership. So I'd rather call them enabling leaders because their servant leadership has a bit of a bad connotation. So there are still people reporting into people. But when you're reporting up to this guy now, what is he or she doing as a manager? Is he or she enabling you to be able to do your work? Because then I don't have a problem with the structural side of things. We don't want, so there's various options of this. There's things called holacracy, flatarchy, and a whole lot of different ways of structuring. But there are still structures in it. It's just how do you break those traditional structures down bit by bit by making sure that you are actually, your structure enables the flow of work. Because if you have a look at it, most of the time that we are not achieving our targets is because of the bureaucracy that exists in our business. So is our structure enabling quick decision making? Is our structure enabling our employees to perform at the level they should be performing? And if it still looks like a traditional org structure and it's doing all of that, then I don't see there's any reason necessarily to change it. One of the things being involved in, and I have just finished my last org design project. I did it finished at the end of September with a client, and now moved on from there because that's not really what I want to do anymore. But one of the things that comes out so often when we talk about this extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, and I may be going a little bit off your topic, but this is so odd to me quite often, is that when we have the command and control management structures, when we have managers that are not enabling leaders, then we have things that we worry about. So we did this structure in this business, an insurance company, and the person didn't really mind that he was pitched at a level of work 3S, but what he did mind is that he wouldn't be invited to the next manager's forum or whatever it is, or that he wouldn't have an allocated parking lot, or whatever. So that's your tradition, and this happens more often than not. It's actually the bigger change that has to happen in these restructuring. So I found very much at the end of the day, you can actually call me what you want, you can put me at what level of work you like, but at the end of the day, don't take away my status. And I think that's what structures that are the traditional structures create, is a status level. So if we can start breaking down those status levels and become more enabling managers, then any structure should be able to work at the end of the day, as long as it's enabling people to do the work, it's not creating bureaucracy, and we are enabled leaders. So I don't think I've totally answered your question, but I've gone a bit of a diversion on that. But it's an important, because it's not easy. It's not easy to change. One last thing I want to say is that the insurance company, I don't think they actually ever did it, but one of the insurance companies in South Africa, large insurance companies, and they looked at this from a digitization perspective. They said, okay, so we need to become a lot more robotic, process automated, but we've got such a traditional organization. They said, let's do all of that. But they set aside 1 billion rand to actually create a whole new business. That would be the modern business of the future. Because they thought that they would not be able to change their own mindset to get to that business that they desired. So that was quite a revolutionary thing. And I don't think, because it wasn't long after that, their CEO was fired. So I don't think and so you won't be able to guess which one it is, because a lot of the insurance company CEOs have been fired in the last year. But yeah, that was sort of a radical, because they realized that they most probably couldn't get to that level.
Cool. Thank you, Myles, for that.